They can communicate well to the investment community, but branding played a pivotal role in a number of companies that I've worked with in getting that clarity for a very complicated subject matter when you're talking about either pharmaceuticals or biotechnology, getting the differentiators out there and understanding what the scale of what they're doing is, and then positioning it in a way that is attractive and different.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Kyle Kostesich. Kyle is an executive creative director with Deep Design Roots, who has spent the last 20 years navigating the complexities of the creative space. He's harnessed his creativity to help B2B and B2C brands thrive in the healthcare, consumer, financial, real estate, health and wellness, luxury, and technology spaces. He also has extensive experience communicating with the investment community for both public and emerging companies. Whether it's corporate identity or website design, brand strategy or visual systems, film or video, Kyle operates best in those spaces where human behavior and brand expressions intersect. Kyle's client experience ranges from luxury brands like the Ritz-Carlton to global financial giants like Edelman Financial Engines, well-known consumer brands like Planet Fitness, and healthcare industry titans like Pfizer. He takes pride in finding creative solutions to his clients' branding problems in the name of doing impactful work. Thus, Kyle has been honored with over 25 industry awards. Kyle previously led ICR's branding and creative practice, serving as chief executive director and managing director. Congrats on navigating the complexities of the creative space, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Karl. Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited to discuss this question that I've seen all the time, which is, why do you think so many young companies undervalue branding?
I think there's a lot of reasons why it happens. I think the biggest one is they're so focused on raising money and they have limited budgets to start that they think it's more important to put that money elsewhere. They're oftentimes focused on their survival and growth, and they don't wrap branding into that for some reason. I think it's a mistake, obviously not because of what I do for a living, but because I think a lot of people misunderstand the role that branding plays and the ways that it can help strengthen your offering so that you can secure more money or you can differentiate your products for the people that will help scale your business.
I totally agree. And I think it comes down to, or one of the main things is that the people just don't understand exactly what branding is. People think it's the logo and the letterhead and all the physical media, but it really comes down to people's relationship with your business. And especially early stage, it's all about the relationships and who you're connected with that are going to lead to success, whether it's the investors or those early clients or finding the right leadership team members to join. And branding makes it all way more effective and easy.
Yeah, I agree. And you're exactly right. People misunderstand what a brand is. A lot of times people simplify it, dumb it down to your visual brand. So my logo, my color scheme, my tagline, that's my brand. That's not your brand. Your brand is what people think about you as a corporate entity and the emotional connections that they have to you. Branding is everything that you can do to try to shape that. But ultimately, your brand is going to be the way that people perceive your company, your image, and the way they react to it. So, the way I like to talk about it with clients, and I deal with a lot of clients that are B2B and think that branding doesn't matter in the B2B space, which is completely wrong. But thinking about it in a B2C scenario, because it's a lot easier to think that way. When you're in a grocery store, you're presented with thousands and thousands of brands. And when you stand there and you decide, I'm going to pick this toothpaste over that toothpaste, you're not a scientist that even knows what any of the ingredients are on the back of that toothpaste. You're solely selecting based on what you think about a company and the branding, the way that they've styled their packaging or the way that they've advertised you in the past, or The way that they donate to certain charitable organizations will ultimately affect which toothpaste you select off of that shelf. So a brand is something that is very big, and it is something that is curated by the public, by humans.
I think it's definitely important that the part you mentioned about how people feel about the business, because it is those feelings that drive the decision making.
Mhm.
And companies think that if their product or like the features and stuff of what they're creating, especially early stage, are also focused on the product or the service or whatever, and they think that's gonna be what really sells people on it. But in reality, when people are making a buying decision, they're not focusing on all the facts and figures. They're going by that feeling, and then they justify it later with all the data. And so if you're trying to persuade people to buy or to invest, you have to make sure you're engaging the part of the brain that actually makes decisions, which is the emotional side, and your brand is the best way to do that.
Yep. Yeah, and ultimately, we want to like the things that we are interacting with, whether it is something we are purchasing or it is humans that we're partnering with as a company. We want to feel a connection. We want to understand it and make sure that it aligns with our values and our morals, whether that's on the corporate side, our business morals and our vision, or it's on the personal side if you're buying products. So it is a very humanistic thing that people oftentimes make non-human, and they simplify it to their brand guide and their colors and all sorts of things that ultimately should resonate with your audience. But it is the emotionality that will ultimately sway people to invest or to buy something.
So I'd imagine with the impressive career you've had working with all these different industries, you must have a good case story of a time where your branding really made the difference for a campaign or for a client. Can you share one of those success stories with us so people have a better idea of how this actually plays out?
Um, I have so many different examples. For bigger companies, there are companies that when we redid their brand, and I'm not just talking about refresh the way that they look, but we've taken them, potentially even renamed their companies for either to get rid of bad negative perceptions that exist in the world about their company, or to start something that is new and different than maybe another venture they had in the past. There's a number of case studies I'm thinking of off the top of my head, specifically in the life sciences space, where we have helped companies differentiate themselves, get early stage funding, and for some of those companies even help them get to the point where they were able to get enough funding and enough interest to go public. So I think, in those cases, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars and changes to organizations on the highest scale. And it's not just branding. These companies have good business strategies. They can communicate well to the investment community, but branding played a pivotal role in a number of companies that I've worked with in getting that clarity for a very complicated subject matter when you're talking about either pharmaceuticals or biotechnology, getting the differentiators out there and understanding what the scale of what they're doing is, and then positioning it in a way that is attractive and different. So I think for me, those ones stand out because you see these companies that often start with a handful of people ultimately become companies that have hundreds and thousands of people working for them. They have great science, but on top of that, they cared about their branding and understood the impact that it could make to get them to their ultimate goal of going public.
And I can see how that the brand helps people understand the value of what the company's doing in those industries where it often takes a lot of technical or like medical expertise to parse the science or the technology behind it. And it seems like especially like B2B companies that are often so focused on like trying to do things quickly and being efficient and tracking all these metrics, that I think branding is something that doesn't necessarily boil down to like a single KPI on a dashboard, which is
Mhm.
also why I think people undervalue it, because they got so focused on these quick metrics and quarterly earnings reports and stuff.
Mhm.
And branding is about building relationships with humans, and those take time to build, and you can't boil it down to a single number on a dashboard. But when you invest in that long-term relationship building, it makes all the other numbers that you are tracking better and easier to obtain, because you're influencing people on that emotional level, and you're creating the brand loyalty that uh, hasn't really existed for a lot of companies, because they've eschewed investing in building relationships. And it's something that when companies don't invest in that, it leaves them vulnerable, because people will get swayed away by a shiny offer from someone else and don't have the emotional ties to any particular company.
Yeah, and branding is highly strategic. It is long term. It is not something that you do as a one-off tactic. So you're right. You know, finding a metric to measure a usually pretty expensive exercise that takes a long time to do can be challenging, because you can't be there in the room when someone makes a decision to choose one brand over another. So it's hard to say this is where it failed. But what you can quantify is the amount of revenue you can increase and the savings that you will have by addressing branding before you do a lot of the tactical stuff. So the way I like to think about it and explain it to people is that the branding efforts are the directions. It's how we talk, it's how we act, it's how we look, it's the people we hire. Now, when you go out into the world with that defined, you don't, every time you create a new marketing material or you search for a new candidate to work for your company, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have it documented and it says, go do this. You're saving time, you're saving money, right? And over time, that consistency builds consumer confidence or trust from your business partners, which ultimately results in more revenue for your company. So while it is hard, it's not like digital analytics where you can just pull up a bunch of things and say, look, we got more people to go to this website, or we got more eyes on Google over here. It's not that easy with branding. But I think the proof that it works is that if you look at the most successful companies in the world and they report what they spend money on, almost all of them, their largest line item is for branding and marketing, because it is so essential to doing business well.
And that is so true. And it baffles me whenever companies, if there's like they have issues, will cut marketing and branding. It's like the first thing. It's like, what do you think brings in the revenue? What do you think like is what's going to keep the customers coming back and keep these relationships that bring the funds you're so desperate for back into the company? It's the marketing and branding. So it seems like there's this, it's nothing new, that like the behavior, or like the paradoxical behavior that people make when there's an economic downturn, or there's like or issues at the company where they just cut these programs that when with the evidence of their importance and how the impact they have on a business is not like a new thing. That it's well known and obvious that marketing and branding is what bring in the revenue, yet it's always seems the first one on the chopping block. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's hard, because obviously a good organization needs to have great salespeople, needs to have a good CEO who can drum home a certain message. But once again, it all comes back to who we say we are as a company and defining that. So everything that a salesperson will go out and sell has to meet the standard of our brand from a messaging standpoint, from a value perspective. And then someone like a CEO has to be able to weave in that stuff into their tone when they make press releases, into who they choose to meet with. So without brand guidance, all of these things become very hard to do well. So if you're going to cut something like that out, because I get it, when you see it on paper, for some reason, people say branding is a nice to have service. It's not essential. My argument is that it's kind of the opposite. Yes, you need these arms of your business to be able to do things and execute this brand vision. But without it, and without somebody curating it for you, you're going to run into issues very quickly, and they're going to be very expensive issues that you'll have to deal with.
And oftentimes those expensive issues will cost more than you supposedly saved by cutting the branding initiatives. It's like that, I guess like ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure or something like that, where it's, you can, if you're just proactive with your branding and your marketing strategy, that and actually follow those guidelines, then it makes, like I said, all the other things more efficient and cost effective and overall more impactful, and you end up saving or earning a lot more than you would have by cutting those programs.
Yeah, and it's I used to work at an integrated communications agency, and they're the clients who invest in things like crisis communications before there's a crisis, who are way better positioned than the companies who go, oops, something bad happened on social media, now I have to deal with this, and are scrambling, right? So it's that forward thinking client that is going to always be better off when it comes to any of this stuff. So if you have a long-term vision and you believe in that long-term vision, and you understand that, yes, it's painful to write a check for these things today, but over the long term, we're going to be happy that we did it because it's going to help us significantly in our business. That's how good companies succeed. And it's not just in branding, it's all of their strategies.
And it comes down to wanting to build these relationships with their audience, with their customers, with their other employees, and connecting on a more human level than just a transactional level. And I think it's something that, one of the trends I saw late last year was that companies have kind of realized that, we need to start rebuilding our brand relationships with customers and stuff, because they've let those atrophy, and it's they're realizing how vulnerable to disruption they've become. And it really comes down to the fact that there's the process for buying is you got to know, like, trust, and then you can buy it. And if you don't have a good brand, people will know you exist, but they're not necessarily going to like you or trust you. And it's going to be a lot harder to sell to people and grow in a sustainable way without that like and that trust. And that's what branding provides.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of that is back to your earlier point about analytics and measuring some of this. Some of that stuff is measurable, at least online, public sentiment about a company, and seeing how that could change with increased brand effort. So you're right. It's companies will not always pay attention to it, but I think there is a growing sense that it's important. But once again, it's a forward-thinking company that will dedicate the time and effort to doing it properly.
And so if there's a company that is, or like a leader at a company who's realizing, oh my gosh, we need to improve our brand messaging, our brand strategy, what's the right place to start? How can they reach out to you? What's the right way to get started with this process with you?
Yeah, I would love to speak to anyone who has those thoughts about their brand. You can reach me through my website. You can look me up at gray-giant.com and connect with me directly there. What we typically do is, for all of these companies that we engage with for the first time, we need to do a discovery. And what that means is we need to talk to your key stakeholders to understand where they think the brand exists, where they think it needs to go. We need to do competitive analysis to see what your comparable companies are doing and see where you fit along that spectrum. And then we need to analyze what you're currently doing, the messaging you're putting out there across your marketing materials or your website. And if you don't have any of those things, great. We're starting with a blank slate and we can kind of paint the canvas. but that's where we almost always start. And from there, the thing that I truly believe in is I'm not going to regiment the thing that we're going to do for your company because that's something that I can sell and it's modular. I'm going to look at your problem and recommend the right tactics to get you to the next stage of your company, because not every company needs to do everything. You may just need to work on your core messaging pillars and understand what those are so that when you speak to people about your company, you can do it eloquently. You may also just look terrible. And when people go to your website, they go, this is not a legitimate company. So we need to work on your visual branding. So I'm going to look at the problems that you have as an organization and recommend the tactics that are right for you at your operating stage. So that's typically how I start, with that discovery and ultimately recommendations. And then from there, we tackle them in an order that makes sense for not just getting branding done in a certain amount of time, but also so that you can properly analyze something and say, yes, this is right, before we go to that next thing that is building off of that exercise.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Kyle. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Kyle, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.